Way back in 1963, Martin Luther King delivered his "I Have a Dream" speech. And here I am, over 50 years later, talking with you about it because I know that every single one of you has seen this speech, you've heard it, you've been affected by it. You all know it so well that I don't have to show you a bit of it for you to be able to picture it in your mind's eye. In fact, I imagine that right now, a bunch of you are picturing it right now, and you're probably comparing his style to mine, and I'm just going to have to ask you to cut that out right now. Thank you. But the thing to get about that speech is it was a work, an amazing work of oratory. It was poetic, it was magic, and it set a brand new standard for what a leadership presentation could be. Now, the downside of having such an amazing standard to look to when you get out to try to lead is you look at something like that and you think, I can't do that. And I think too many of us are making a decision like that. There are countless times in our lives when we want to say something to somebody to make a difference for them. But maybe we don't know exactly what to say, maybe we don't know exactly how to say it, and so we decide to not say anything. And when we do this, we are deciding not to make a difference for the people that we care about the most. Now, I know how painful and awkward it can be to not know what to say, and I believe it's this that makes us decide not to say anything at all, even when the opportunity on the other side is potentially huge. It's why we don't get into sales. It's why we hate networking and interviewing so much. It's why there are really so few really inspiring leaders out there. We just don't know what to say. And really, there are only a handful of possible reasons for why we can't figure out what to say. We might be feeling so much anxiety and so much self-consciousness that we just can't think straight. Or maybe we're worried about sounding stupid. Maybe we're worried that we're going to come across as pushy or offensive. Or maybe it's like, it's not my place to say something. Maybe it's inappropriate for me to say something. Now, I think all the most effective leaders in the world use the same simple tool to figure out what to say in any situation. I think Martin Luther King used this same tool when he wrote every single presentation he ever delivered. That tool is story. And I know a fair amount of story because I spent most of my life not knowing what to say. When I was a kid, I loved stories, and I got into film, and I co-created this improvisational acting workshop where we were using story to help actors figure out how to improvise their way through a scene. And something really kind of cool happened in this workshop. We were helping people build the skill in the workshop, and we were sending people home to practice. And what I discovered is all actors have day jobs. So they were not only practicing at home, but they were practicing at work, too. And they were telling us that the workshop was making a big difference for them at work. So that gave us this idea that we could be helping business professionals. We started working with business professionals to help them with their biggest challenges, and we discovered that story was really useful for them too. Now, throughout this whole process, I was learning just a ton about story, but something was missing. I was discovering that we kind of had to recreate the wheel every time we were helping somebody with a new situation. And I was recognizing, our clients, the people that we're working with, they want to be able to use the same thing over and over again, regardless of the situation that they faced. So I dove into some research to find out what the core of story was. And what I discovered is there is actually very little agreement out there about what story is, let alone how it worked. The only two things that I found was, number one, people agreed that human beings create story, and number two, there is something about change related to story. Story is somehow about change. So what I did was I asked myself the question, if story is about change, what is the quickest, simplest, easiest way for somebody to tell a story? So I tested a bunch of stuff and I experimented, and I discovered there are 4 steps to telling a story. So the first step is to be really clear on who it is you're talking about. It's your main character who experiences the change in a story. It doesn't matter who your main character is, as long as your audience cares about them. Because if your audience cares about the main character, they're going to care about the story. If they don't care about the main character, they won't care about the story. Second thing that you need when you tell a story is you need a beginning. It's a situation that the main character experiences emotionally. The third thing that every story needs is a middle, which is really just action. Stuff needs to happen in every story. The fourth and final thing that every story needs is an ending, which is a situation distinct and different from the situation at the beginning that the main character experiences emotionally. So every story is about a main character in a situation feeling a certain way, and then stuff happens, and at the end, the main character is in another situation feeling another way. It's as simple as that. Now, why is story so helpful for figuring out what to say when you're really looking to figure out something to say? It's because human beings just naturally experience change. Change happens to us, and what we do is we tell a story to explain why that change occurred and what it meant to us. Also, as we look into the future, we anticipate change, and we tell ourselves stories about that too. And it's that zone in particular where you can really see just amazing power in story. In fact, it's a particular kind of story that leaders know extremely well. It's a leadership story. So leadership stories give language to the future. Leadership stories talk about the people that leaders are talking directly to. The main character is the audience, which makes it impossible for the audience to not care about this story because the story is about them. Leadership stories talk about this audience's current situation that is problematic in some way. It doesn't have to be terrible, horrible, awful, but there does have to be something incomplete or imperfect about this situation. And it has to resonate as true and accurate in the audience's mind. Now, leadership stories lay out an action plan, something that has to happen to make a difference for this audience. Finally, leadership stories are about a happier ending, a situation in the future that this audience wants to end up with. Now, the net result of every leadership story is that audiences get that this action plan is going to make the difference for them. It's going to make the change that they want to experience. Now, a really cool thing happens for us when we start to create leadership stories. The stuff that's normally in our way when we try to figure out what to say isn't in our way anymore. So like the anxiety and the self-consciousness, it's not there because our attention isn't on us anymore. It's on them. It's on the people that we're talking to, the people that we're telling a story about. And we're not worried about sounding stupid anymore because we know that they care about their story, and that's where their attention is going to be. It's not going to be on judging us. We don't have to worry about being pushy or offensive because all we're doing is we're telling their story. We're talking about them going from their not so happy beginning to their happier ending. All we're trying to do is help, not push. And finally, we don't have to worry about being presumptuous or inappropriate because all we're doing is we're telling a story about their future, a future that hasn't happened yet, and there's nothing presumptuous about that. Now, let's connect the dots back to I Have a Dream. When Martin Luther King was writing that presentation, he knew that he wasn't just going to be talking to the people in attendance that day. He knew that the eyes of the entire country were going to be on him. So he didn't tell a story just about black people in America. He told a story about the country as a whole. And the not so happy beginning that he laid out was the country was suffering because it was defaulting on our central promise of providing life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness to all Americans. Now, he laid out an action plan. He said we need to end segregation, and we need to grant citizenship rights to all Americans. And the happy ending that he laid out, well, that was his dream. He said this country would manifest its destiny, and all Americans will celebrate their freedom together. Now, something kind of cool happens when we apply this dissection process to a work of art like this. For one thing, most of the poetry goes away, and a lot of the magic goes away. But at the same time, we get really clear on his point. We understand the story at the heart of the presentation. We get that what he was saying is, if we end segregation, if we grant full citizenship rights to all Americans, then we, the country, America, we're going to end our suffering, and we're going to go to this place where we all celebrate together. Now, you might get the idea that all you need to do to lead is tell a leadership story. And I think that's true. I think you don't necessarily need the poetry. I think you don't necessarily need the magic. I think all you need to do is tell a complete leadership story, and you need to tell it with a certain amount of confidence. You couldn't tell this story like, hey, I don't know about you, but I think maybe America is suffering right now. Maybe because we are, I don't know, like defaulting on the central promise of what America is all about. Maybe, you can't do that. What you can do is add certainty and confidence into the mix. And when you do that, maybe the original magic of the speech doesn't come back, but what does show up is amazing power and amazing potency. And it sounds something like this. Right now, America is suffering, and it's suffering because we are defaulting on our basic central promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness to all Americans. We need to end segregation, and we need to grant full citizenship rights to all Americans, regardless of the color of their skin. And when we do this, we are going to manifest our destiny as a country, and all of us are going to celebrate together. Now, all you need to do to tell a leadership story is tell it completely and tell it with confidence. I want to tell you my leadership story because my story is about you. Every single one of you cares about somebody. It could be a loved one, it could be your family, could be a team, could be a company, could be your community. You all care about somebody enough to want to make a difference for them. But you don't know what to say, so you haven't said anything. You've been stuck. I want to suggest that you create and tell a leadership story. Talk to them about their current situation, about them. Get their perspective on it. Find out what's going on for them. Find out how they feel. Talk to them about an action plan. Who needs to do what to make a difference? Talk to them about their happier ending. Talk about what that looks like and what it will feel like. Talk about all of this stuff with confidence. And if you do this, you will be the leader that you want to be. Thank you very much.